In the early 1970s, a smiling young woman holding a baby appeared on millions of boxes of Ivory Snow. Around the same time, that same woman was starring in one of the most controversial films playing in American theaters. When reporters connected the two identities, it created a cultural paradox so perfect it felt almost scripted. The wholesome detergent box mother and the star of an explicit underground movie were the same person. Her name was Marilyn Chambers. Before notoriety arrived, Chambers' life looked fairly ordinary. Born Marilyn Ann Briggs in 1952 in Providence, she grew up in the comfortable coastal suburb of Westport. As a young girl, she gravitated toward dance, acting, and modeling, eventually finding commercial work in New York City. The modeling industry in the late 1960s was a constant churn of catalog shoots and small advertising campaigns, and Chambers worked steadily enough to build a resume without becoming particularly famous. Her path into film, however, took an unexpected turn when she relocated to San Francisco in the early 1970s. She responded to a casting ad placed in the Chronicle by the Mitchell brothers. When Chambers arrived for the audition, she discovered the film was not quite the mainstream production she had imagined. The picture they were casting was an explicit feature designed for theatrical release. Chambers initially hesitated. She had been looking for legitimate acting roles, not adult film work. But the producers had a very specific image in mind for the central role. They wanted a blonde actress who projected a wholesome, almost upper-class elegance, someone who could convincingly play a kidnapped socialite at the center of an elaborate spectacle. Chambers, with her polished modeling look and resemblance to contemporary star Sybil Shepherd, fit their vision almost perfectly. Still uncertain, Chambers negotiated aggressively before agreeing to appear in the film. She demanded a relatively high salary, insisted that performers undergo testing before production, and most significantly secured a percentage of the film's revenue. According to accounts from the production, the Mitchell brothers agreed to give her roughly 10% of the film's gross, a remarkably generous arrangement in an industry where performers were usually paid only a one-time fee. That decision would prove extraordinarily profitable. The film Behind the Green Door became one of the most famous adult movies ever made. Structured more like an experimental stage production than a conventional narrative, Chambers' character is less a traditional protagonist than an anchor for the genre content, moving through the film's surreal sequences while the audience observes. Upon its release, journalists caught onto something huge. The star of the film was the same woman, appearing on Ivory Snow detergent packaging. The story exploded into national headlines. Suddenly, audiences were lining up out of curiosity alone. The film rode that wave to enormous success, playing extended theatrical runs in cities including San Francisco and New York City. The Mitchell brothers attempted to capitalize on the success with the resurrection of Eve, another stylized production that again placed Chambers at the center of the narrative. The film has a more detailed plot than Green Door and touches on issues of sexual politics and race-based physical envy. While it performed respectably in adult theaters, it never quite captured the same cultural lightning strike. By then, however, Chambers had become one of the few recognizable personalities in the adult film industry. Her name attracted audiences, and filmmakers outside the genre began to take notice. One of them was director David Cronenberg, who cast Chambers in Rabid. Cronenberg deliberately chose her because of the notoriety surrounding her earlier career, believing that audiences' awareness of her reputation would add an unsettling dimension to the film. The experiment worked. Chambers delivered an eerie performance as a woman who develops a parasitic infection after experimental surgery. The film became a cult horror classic, and critics noted that she carried the story largely through physical performance rather than dialogue. For a moment, it appeared she might successfully transition into mainstream cinema. Hollywood, however, proved hesitant to embrace a performer whose fame originated in adult films. While Rabid built a lasting cult following, Chambers eventually returned to the industry that had first made her famous. In 1980, she starred in Insatiable, directed by Stu Segal. The film centered on a glamorous fashion model searching for emotional and romantic fulfillment, combining narrative storytelling with polished genre content. With its relatively high production values and character-driven plot, Insatiable became one of the most successful adult films of the early 1980s. The film arrived during another turning point for the industry, as adult films increasingly moved out of public theaters and into private living rooms. Chambers continued appearing on screen during this transitional period. This included Up and Coming in 1983, a production that plays very much like a classic adult ensemble comedy drama of the period. Chambers remains a central presence, but the film surrounds her with a roster of recognizable performers, creating the sense of a star-driven showcase rather than tightly plotted narrative. The cast has plenty of room to bounce off one another in the playful tongue-in-cheek style that defined many adult features of the early VHS era. She reprised her role in Insatiable 2, which performed well, and also appeared in the spy parody Angel of Heat, a playful genre spoof reflecting the era's fascination with mixing adult storytelling and pop culture pastiche. In 1989's Party Incorporated, Chambers plays Marilyn Saunders in an interesting experiment directed by Chuck Vincent. The film mixes sex comedy with a playful metastructure, occasionally framing events as if a camera crew were documenting Marilyn's life. The result is a low-budget, late 80s ensemble comedy packed with shambolic mishaps and knowingly campy humor, with a lot of breaking of the fourth wall. By the 1990s, Marilyn Chambers had largely transitioned away from the kind of headline-grabbing adult features that made her famous. Instead, she appeared in a series of low-budget erotic dramas and softcore video productions. Films like Breakfast in Bed, where she plays a fading movie star who turns a struggling hotel into a profitable brothel, and The Marilyn Diaries, an erotic anthology built around a journalist publishing the scandalous contents of a private diary, leaned heavily on Chambers' name recognition. Other projects from the decade, including the comedy Bikini Bistro, Bedtime Stories, and New York Nights, continued this trend. These films were modest productions designed for the late-night cable and VHS markets and were predominantly R-rated. By the time she appeared in Marilyn Chambers' Desire in 1997, her role had shifted almost entirely into that of a legacy figure. However, at the very end of the 90s, Marilyn Chambers returned to X-rated film in a trio of projects directed by fellow Golden Age veteran Veronica Hart. The comeback began with Still Insatiable, a film that deliberately echoed the title and legacy of Chambers' earlier hit series, pairing her with a younger cast that included Stacey Valentine and Kylie Ireland. The production leaned on Insatiable in name only, with her playing the role of Senator Charlotte Ballworth, a staunch anti-pornography crusader. She followed this with two more collaborations: Edge Play in 2001, a darker, fetish-tinged ensemble piece reflecting the evolving tone of the modern adult market, and Dark Chambers, a noir-tinged virtual reality thriller that at least hinted at a production budget. The latter stands out as one of the more intriguing entries in her late filmography, not least because it also marks the final adult performance of Erica Boyer. Taken together, the three films play like a late-career epilogue, briefly placing one of the industry's most recognizable stars alongside a new generation of performers before she quietly exited adult filmmaking for good. In the years before her death, Marilyn Chambers lived largely outside the spotlight, occasionally resurfacing for interviews, documentaries, and convention appearances. The industry she had once helped define had long since transformed, but Chambers remained a symbol of that brief, strange moment in the early 1970s when adult films slipped into the cultural mainstream. On April 12, 2009, she passed away at her home in Santa Clarita, aged 56. In the years since, her legacy has only grown clearer, not simply as an adult film star, but as the unlikely face of an era when underground cinema, counterculture, and mainstream curiosity collided. For a fleeting moment, the woman who once smiled from a box of Ivory Snow detergent became one of the most recognizable figures in American film's boldest cultural experiment. For that, and many more reasons, she will always be the true queen of the golden age.